Something is shifting in Europe. Power, influence, leadership all seem to be gravitating toward one country, with challenges mounting across the EU, from economic turbulence and political fragmentation to social unrest. The continent finds itself at a pivotal moment. The stakes are high, and it is looking for a new leader post-Brexit. And power, influence, leadership all seem to be gravitating toward one country, France. An emblem of revolution, culture, and enlightenment, France is now positioning itself for something much bigger. With its rich history, it has been at the forefront of European affairs for centuries. But can it reclaim its mantle as the continent's leader in today's complex geopolitical landscape? This is more than just a question of politics. It's about the future of a continent. Will France seize the moment, or will it falter under the weight of expectations? Let's dive in with the Atlas shift. Since the European Union's formation, leadership within the bloc has often felt like a balancing act. For decades, Germany and the UK were the economic and political heavyweights, holding much of the influence. But things have changed. The United Kingdom, the second largest economy in the EU, has left, and Germany, the traditional leader of the bloc, is facing its own internal crisis. Rising inflation, slowing economic growth, and an aging population are putting strain on Europe's once most powerful economy. With Angela Merkel gone, political instability seems to be on the rise, turning all eyes now to France. France isn't just any European country. It's the second largest economy in the EU, boasting a GDP of nearly $2.5 trillion. That's about 15% of the entire EU economy. While Germany still holds the top spot economically, France's stability and resilience during recent crises make it a serious contender for leadership. France's economic strength isn't just about numbers. It leads in industries critical to Europe's future, like aerospace, agriculture, and energy. Companies like Airbus, which have their roots deep in France, represent Europe's edge in global manufacturing. And when it comes to luxury, French brands like Louis Vuitton, Chanel, and L'Oréal aren't just cultural icons, they are global economic powerhouses. France is responsible for about 25% of the EU's total aerospace exports and nearly 30% of luxury goods. That's not just influence, that's leadership. But here's where it gets interesting. In the face of global turmoil, the COVID-19 pandemic, energy crises, supply chain disruptions, France didn't just survive, it thrived. In 2021, France's economy grew by an impressive 7%. That's the fastest rate in over 50 years. But how? How did France manage this when much of the world was struggling? The secret lies in France's forward-thinking investments. France poured billions into renewable energy and cutting-edge technology, becoming one of Europe's largest investors in green infrastructure. In fact, nearly 20% of France's energy now comes from renewable sources. And let's not forget nuclear power. France generates 70% of its electricity from nuclear energy, more than any other country in the world. This makes France uniquely positioned as Europe faces one of its biggest challenges: energy security. While other nations are scrambling to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels, France is already ahead of the game. But economic strength alone doesn't make a leader. Germany, despite having the largest economy in Europe, hasn't automatically become the continent's global leader. What France has, and Germany is losing, is momentum. While Germany faces stagnation and political challenges, France is rising. It's becoming Europe's economic stabilizer and innovation hub. France was the first major European nation to fully rebound from the pandemic's economic impact, and its tech sector is flourishing. Paris is no longer just a city of lights, it's the city of startups. Station F in Paris is the world's largest startup incubator, with over 1,000 startups. France invested over $5 billion into its tech sector last year, fueling industries like AI and biotech, positioning itself as a leader in Europe's digital transformation. As France works to reshape the political and economic future of Europe, one thing becomes clear: leadership in the modern world isn't just about ideas and economy. In a time of global instability, with new threats on the horizon, the strength to defend those ideals is equally crucial. And when it comes to military muscle, France doesn't just hold its own, it leads the pack in Europe. After Brexit, France isn't just another European military power. It's now the only country in the European Union with nuclear nuclear weapons. This gives France a unique strategic advantage in global and European politics. With 290 nuclear warheads, France has one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals. And it's not just a theoretical deterrent, it's actively maintained through a fleet of 4 ballistic missile submarines and cutting-edge air-to-surface missiles, making France a serious military force both in Europe and globally. France spends a massive $44 billion on defense every year. That's nearly 2% of its GDP, one of the highest defense budgets in Europe, and maintains one of the most technologically advanced and versatile militaries in the world. While countries like Germany have hesitated to increase defense spending, France has been steadily modernizing its forces. In fact, French defense spending is only second to the US among NATO members. France's military isn't just large, it's state-of-the-art. The Rafale jet, for example, is one of the most advanced multi-role fighters in the world, capable of air superiority, precision strikes, and nuclear deterrence. And then there's Charles de Gaulle, the only nuclear-powered aircraft carrier outside the US Navy. It's a floating fortress, capable of projecting power anywhere on the globe. But France's military influence doesn't stop at its borders. It's one of the few European nations with a truly global reach. From military bases in Africa to naval deployments in the Indo-Pacific, France's forces are stationed across Europe and the world, making it not just a regional power, but a global military leader. France is actively involved in counter-terrorism operations in West Africa, leading missions against extremist groups in countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. In fact, France has been at the forefront of stabilizing the Sahel region, a key battleground in the global fight against terrorism. But why does France's military strength matter more now than ever? Europe is facing a perfect storm of threats, from Russian aggression in Eastern Europe to a rising China flexing its muscles in the Indo-Pacific, and the ongoing threat of terrorism at home. As tensions rise with Russia and concerns about energy security grow, Europe needs a military leader, and with the UK out of the EU, it now has unparalleled leverage in shaping Europe's defense policies. But here's where it gets interesting. President Macron has been vocal about wanting Europe to rely less on the United States for defense and more on its own capabilities. He's pushing for something called strategic autonomy, a Europe that can defend itself by itself. And this idea is gaining traction in Europe, but not without resistance. Some countries still want to lean on the US and NATO for security, but it seems that France can unite Europe behind this vision of a more self-reliant defense. But strength isn't just measured in military might. True leadership also requires diplomacy, the ability to bring nations together, to negotiate, and to influence on the global stage. France, with its rich history of diplomacy, has long been at the heart of international relations. From the end of World War II to the creation of the European Union, French leaders have consistently shaped the global stage. Charles de Gaulle once said that France is destined to be a world power, not by force, but by diplomacy. And France has lived up to that destiny. It was one of the founding members of the European Union, a cornerstone of NATO, and a leading voice in global climate action. The Paris Agreement, signed in 2015, stands as a testament to France's ability to bring the world together around a common cause. Think about it. 195 countries agreed to work together to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit global warming. This wasn't just a diplomatic success for France, it was a defining moment for global cooperation, and it cemented France's role as a leader in climate diplomacy. Today, this legacy continues under the leadership of Emmanuel Macron. Since taking office, Macron has not only been France's president, he's become Europe's most vocal diplomat, pushing for bold reforms both within the EU and on the global stage. France is also positioning itself as a mediator between the great powers, most notably between Russia and the West. When tensions flared in Eastern Europe, Macron was the first European leader to visit Moscow, trying to prevent escalation. While his efforts to mediate the Ukraine conflict haven't always been successful, they've shown that France is willing to take on the difficult role of peacemaker. Macron's belief that Europe should be able to talk to both Russia and the US positions France as a bridge in global diplomacy. Macron's vision? A stronger, more sovereign Europe that can stand on its own in an increasingly unstable world, and he's been tireless in championing this cause, from climate change and digital sovereignty to defense and economic resilience. And interestingly, Macron's vision isn't always in line with the United States. In fact, he's been one of the few European leaders to openly challenge US dominance in global affairs. Macron has publicly called NATO brain dead, suggesting that Europe can no longer fully rely on the US for its security. But here's the real question. Can Macron's diplomatic vision unite Europe? His call for a more sovereign and independent Europe has sparked debate across the continent. Some nations are eager to reduce their reliance on the US, while others fear it could weaken NATO. The idea of a more independent Europe is bold, but not without its risks. However, strong European nations like Germany and Italy have shown growing support for Macron's vision. Let's not forget, France's diplomatic vision isn't limited to Europe. It is also looking outward, especially toward Africa and the Indo-Pacific. France is actively building stronger ties with African nations, aiming to reshape the continent's relationship with Europe. It's also increasing its presence in the Indo-Pacific to counterbalance China's growing influence. And by building these global alliances, France is creating a new diplomatic chessboard, one where it doesn't just follow the moves of other powers, but sets the pace for the game itself. Although France's influence on the world stage is undeniable, but diplomacy doesn't just happen across oceans. It's needed right here in Europe. The real challenge for France is not only in navigating global politics, but in mending the fractures within its own continent. For decades, the European Union has represented peace, cooperation, and prosperity. But recent years have tested these ideals. Brexit shook the Union to its core, exposing deep divisions between those who believe in a stronger Europe and those who want to regain national sovereignty. Across Europe, nationalist and Eurosceptic movements have gained momentum. From Hungary and Poland challenging EU rule of law to Italy's populist governments questioning financial contributions, the fractures are widening. And then there's France. In the face of these growing divides, France has consistently pushed for more unity, more cooperation, and a stronger Europe. France has called for changes in the EU's decision-making process, especially when it comes to foreign policy and defense. Right now, unanimous voting slows down decision-making and prevents the EU from acting swiftly. French leadership believes that for Europe to be strong, it needs to move away from unanimity and toward majority rule on key issues. This could be a game changer, allowing the EU to act quickly in times of crisis, whether it's defending against external threats or negotiating trade deals. Furthermore, Europe's divisions aren't just political, they're economic too. The North-South divide is a major issue. Northern countries like Germany and the Nordics have strong economies, while southern nations like Greece, Spain, and Italy face debt and unemployment. This divide has caused friction, with northern nations reluctant to share financial burdens, leaving the South feeling abandoned in crises like the Eurozone and COVID-19. Here's where France steps in. Geographically and economically between both regions, Macron has acted as a mediator, pushing for solidarity and support for the South while working with Germany for stability. His role in securing the $750 billion EU Recovery Fund proves that France can unite Europe when it's needed most. Today, France and Germany together account for nearly 40% of the EU's total GDP. Their cooperation is essential for any major EU reform to succeed. With Merkel gone, Macron has stepped into the spotlight as the senior statesman in this partnership, working closely with Olaf Scholz to keep Europe's engine running. So, after everything we've seen, there's one big question left. Is France truly ready to lead Europe? Can this nation of revolutions, art, and intellect take the reins of a continent that's at a crossroads? What the situation suggests is that France isn't just asking for leadership, it's proving it deserves a seat at the head of the table. With its military strength, cutting-edge innovation, and ability to negotiate on the global stage, France stands as one of Europe's most well-rounded nations. It's ready to back up its ambitions with real power.